So, um, if you have ever opened a textbook on quantitative finance or, maybe just stumbled across a white paper on advanced statistics and you found yourself staring at a stochastic calculus equation, you know the exact feeling I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely. It is a completely universal experience.
Right. You look at this block of text and it's just a chaotic jumble of Greek letters, those integral signs that look like stretched out S's, random variables scattered literally everywhere. And your brain just initiates this emergency shutdown protocol.
Yeah, it's pure involuntary self-defense.
Exactly. It's like a cold wave washes over you, your eyes glaze over, and your working memory simply overflows. I mean, you are absolutely not alone in that reaction.
It is a profoundly human response, honestly, because the left hemisphere of our brain, which, handles all that sequential, rigid, symbolic processing, is essentially trying to render a highly complex, multidimensional world.
Right, like trying to run a modern video game on a calculator.
Exactly. It's using the mental equivalent of a basic text editor. It crashes. We look at those dense formulas and we try to learn them through brute force memorization.
Which never works.
Never. We tell ourselves, okay, this symbol means the reversion rate, and this one with the bar over it is the mean. We repeat it 5 times, and 10 minutes later, it has completely evaporated from our minds.
And that evaporation is the exact problem we're tackling today. That is why we are dedicating this deep dive to a complete translation, because our mission today is to take that cold, incredibly intimidating mathematical syntax that governs Wall Street and algorithms and, frankly, the physical universe.
A literal universe.
Right, and we're going to strip it entirely away. We are going to perform a kind of cognitive magic trick with the research we've compiled. We are taking these terrifying concepts, things like the Vasicek model, geometric Brownian motion, Ido's lemma, and translating them into the language your right brain actually processes.
The language it actually loves, honestly.
Exactly. Vivid, physical, dynamic, mental movies. We were replacing the Greek alphabet with tangible things. We're talking rubber bands, vibrating sieves, drunkards stumbling out of bars, and heavy depleted uranium tanks driving through violent storms.
And what's so fascinating here is that the beauty of doing it this way is that these are not just clever little teaching analogies. We didn't just make these up to make the medicine go down easier.
Right, they're not just metaphors.
No, they're mathematically precise translations of reality. The equations themselves are literally describing these physical truths. The math is just a highly condensed shorthand that professionals use to save time.
Because writing out the heavy tank in the storm takes too long on a chalkboard.
Exactly. But once you see the physical machine operating behind the symbols, you realize something profound. The same mathematical engines driving high-frequency trading algorithms on Wall Street are the exact same engines driving, say, the physical spread of ink in a glass of water. Yeah, or the accumulation of wealth over a lifetime. And even the way your own memory decays over time to protect your sanity.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Our goal is not for you to walk away from this deep dive having memorized a single equation for a test. That is worthless.
Completely worthless.
Our goal is to install a series of universal mental engines in your mind. We want to permanently alter how you view stability, how you conceptualize accumulating wealth, and how you perceive the very nature of randomness and noise in your daily life.
And to build that foundation, we really have to start with one of the most elegant frameworks in the research we're looking at.
The Vasicek model.
Right, the Vasicek model for interest rates, because it perfectly illustrates how that left brain panic we talked about can be instantly cured with a simple right brain physical object.
It really is the perfect starting point. So the Vasicek model is this famous differential equation used primarily in finance to model how interest rates move and evolve over time.
Yeah, and if you were to write it out on a blackboard, it looks like a mess. It's rates of change, a bounding line variable, a current state variable, and a giant chunk of pure randomness attached to the very end.
And right there, if we try to read that formula out loud, the listener's brain is just going to shut down. So we're throwing the raw syntax in the trash immediately. We don't need the letters. We just need to build a very simple physical device in your mind's eye.
Okay, I love this visualization. Let's do it.
So picture this. Imagine a horizontal line drawn in the air. This is your baseline. In the financial world, let's say this is the long-term average interest rate that a central bank, like the Federal Reserve, desperately wants to maintain.
Let's call it 5%.
Perfect, 5%. That solid baseline is our target. Now, attached to this horizontal line is a rubber band. And hanging down at the very bottom of this rubber band is a little glass marble.
And that marble represents the current, real-time, chaotic interest rate today.
Exactly. When you look at the complex differential equation through that lens, you realize there are actually only two physical forces acting on that marble. That's the entire model. Just two distinct forces pulling it around the room.
And force number one is the rubber band itself. Let's break down how that rubber band physically operates. Its core function is driven by the distance between the marble and the baseline. It is entirely driven by the gap.
Right, the distance between where we are and where we want to be.
Exactly. And the direction of that gap matters immensely. If the marble gets pushed up high above the baseline, say the current interest rate spikes to 8%, but our target line is sitting down at 5%, the model subtracts the current reality from the target.
Target minus reality, so 5 minus 8.
Right. 5 minus 8 gives you a -3. And what does a negative number mean to our physical machine? It means the rubber band is stretching and generating a downward pull. It actively wants to snap that marble back down to the baseline.
It's a corrective force.
Completely. And conversely, if the marble drops to 2%, the target of 5 minus the reality of 2 gives a +3. The rubber band generates an upward force, pulling it back up.
And the thickness of that rubber band. Because in the math, there's a specific variable sitting there that just dictates stiffness.
Right, gamma.
Yeah, so if that variable is a massive number, you have an incredibly thick, stiff, unforgiving industrial rubber band. The second that marble steps even a millimeter out of line, it gets violently yanked back.
It doesn't tolerate any wandering.
Not at all. But if the variable is small, you have a loose, floppy rubber band. It lets the marble wander around, explore the space a bit, before slowly, gently coaxing it home. In academic finance, they call this the mean reversion rate, which sounds intimidating. But we just call it the rubber band's stiffness.
It's such a grounding way to view it. The physical constraint is what makes it understandable. But if we only had the rubber band in this universe, the marble would just eventually come to a complete stop, right?
Yeah, it would just sit dead center on the baseline.
Exactly, resting at exactly 5% forever. And anyone who has lived in the real world knows the economy doesn't work like that at all.
No, not even a little bit.
The physical universe is messy, chaotic, and relentlessly unpredictable. So the model introduces force number 2.
Right. Force number 2 is the wind.
Yes. This is a totally random, chaotic, unpredictable wind constantly blowing across the room. It is the Brownian motion, the raw randomness itself, blowing left, blowing right, pushing up, slamming down.
And this wind has a dial on it, right?
It does. A variable that represents the maximum power of the gusts, the volatility. If that dial is turned all the way up, it is a Category 5 hurricane. If the dial is turned down, it is a gentle summer breeze.
So you put these two forces together, and you can clearly see the movie playing in your head. You have a marble tethered by a rubber band to a baseline, and a violent storm is trying to blow it all over the room.
The wind blasts it upward, but the rubber band stretches out, creates tension, and fights back, pulling it down.
The wind suddenly shifts and slams the marble downward, and the rubber band stretches the other way, catching it like a bungee cord. The research uses a really brilliant visceral analogy for this exact dynamic. It describes it as a very drunk person holding a dog leash.
I love that one. It captures the duality perfectly.
It really does.
Because the drunk person is stumbling completely randomly left, right, forward, backward. They have no idea where they're going. That is the random wind. But they are tethered to the dog or tethered to a path by that physical leash.
So while the exact micropath they take is a jagged, chaotic, unpredictable mess of staggering steps, the overall macro trajectory is confined.
Exactly. They can never wander infinitely far away because eventually the leash goes lot. The system has boundaries.
Now, wait, this is something that always tripped me up when I used to try and parse systems like this. We just established that the rubber band's pull is based on the target minus the reality, the baseline minus the current state. Why is it locked in that specific order? Like if someone is looking at a system in their own life, like trying to lose weight or save money, how do they know it isn't reality minus target? Both sound perfectly plausible to the logical brain, especially if you're trying to remember in a panic.
That is such a good question, because flipping those two variables doesn't just give you a slightly wrong answer, it completely inverts the physics of the universe.
Oh, wow, really?
Oh, yeah. To figure out the correct order, you never rely on rote memory. You use a boundary test. You do a quick 2-second mental experiment where you push the system to a ridiculous extreme and watch what it does.
Okay, let's run a boundary test right now. Let's actually step away from finance and use a household thermostat.
Perfect. That's the best way to see it. Let's say your ideal target room temperature, your baseline, is 70 degrees. But the reality, the current temperature of the room you're sitting in, is sweltering. It is 100 degrees.
So your target is 70, your reality is 100.
Yeah.
If we run the formula we proposed, target minus reality, we get 70 minus 100. That outputs a negative 30.
Right. And what does a negative 30 communicate to the air conditioning unit? It means cool it down, push the temperature in the negative direction. It actively pulls the 100-degree reality back down toward the 70-degree target. The system stabilizes itself. It is a healing mechanism.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. But what if I wired the thermostat backward? What if I programmed it as reality minus target?
Let's run that exact same scenario through the machine. Reality is 100, target is 70. 100 minus 70 gives you a positive 30.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was right. The formula would tell the HVAC system, hey, we are getting a positive 30 signal. That means we need to add 30 degrees of heat.
Oh my God, so the system would push the already sweltering 100-degree room to 130 degrees.
Exactly. And then at 130, the gap is now positive 60, so it blasts even more heat. The room goes to 160, then 200. It turns your living room into an oven. It is a catastrophic runaway explosion.
That's terrifying.
Have you ever been at a concert where someone holds a microphone too close to the speaker?
Oh yeah, you get that deafening high-pitched screech that makes everyone cover their ears. It's the worst.
That audio screech is the exact, literal manifestation of reality minus target. The microphone picks up a tiny bit of ambient noise. It sends it to the speaker amplifies it. The microphone picks up the new, louder noise, sends it back to the speaker, which amplifies it again.
It creates an infinite positive feedback loop that destroys the system.
That is wild. Just flipping the order of two concepts turns a stabilizing thermostat into a bomb.
And this reveals a universal truth of systems, which the source material calls the negative feedback invariant.
Right. All stabilizing forces in nature, in society, in engineering, in human biology are driven by the gap between the ideal and the reality. The formula for any corrective healing action must always be ideal minus reality, target minus current state.
Because if the reality exceeds the ideal, the gap becomes negative, providing the necessary resistance to pull it back. Human biology uses this constantly, right?
Oh, all the time. If your blood sugar spikes, your pancreas releases insulin to pull it down. Target minus reality.
It applies to literally everything you try to manage in life. Like if my target weight is 160 pounds, but my reality is 180, the gap is negative 20. That is a negative pressure telling me to eat less and exercise more.
Exactly.
If my target bank balance is $10,000 for an emergency fund, but my reality is $5,000, the gap is positive $5,000. It is a positive pressure telling me to save more. It is an incredibly grounding way to look at how we regulate our lives.
It completely changes how you read the world. When you encounter any complex system, whether it's an economic policy, a corporate management structure, or a piece of software, your first reaction shouldn't be to get lost in the details.
You don't need to read the whole code base.
No, you isolate the core engine and run that boundary test. Ask yourself, if a random shock hits this system, what does the core engine do? Does it correct itself, or does it amplify the shock and explode?
That perfectly bridges us to the wind. Because we've got the rubber band figured out. It heals the system. Now we have to talk about the trauma, the noise, the random wind blowing our marble around.
The fun part.
Right. We established earlier that there's a variable acting as a dial for the maximum wind, or the volatility. But here is something that always confused me. When I watch the Weather Channel or listen to financial pundits, they are obsessed with averages.
Always.
The average wind speed,
Yeah.
the average market return.
Yeah.
Why do the mathematicians designing these precise models ignore the average wind? Why do they focus entirely on the maximum gust, the volatility?
Yeah. Okay, to get this, we have to fundamentally demystify how noise actually operates in physical reality, and why relying on averages in a random system is one of the most dangerous psychological traps a human being can fall into.
That's a strong statement.
It's true, though. If you apply a traditional left-brain statistical definition to that random Brownian motion, the wind blowing the marble, you run into a mind-bending truth. The average wind of a perfectly random system is exactly 0.
Wait, 0? How can it be 0 if it's blowing the marble all over the place? I mean, it's chaotic.
It is exactly 0 because of the definition of perfect randomness. Think of it as flipping a perfectly fair coin infinitely fast. For every gust of wind that blows the marble 1 inch to the left, there is a mathematically guaranteed equal and opposite gust that will eventually blow it 1 inch to the right.
So we just cancel out.
Exactly. If you sit in that room with an anemometer for an hour and meticulously record every single push positive lefts, negative rights, up, down, and then you average them all together, they perfectly cancel each other out. The expected value, the mathematical average of that violence, is 0.
Okay, my brain rejects that completely. If I am standing outside in a hurricane, the wind is literally ripping the roof shingles off my house.
Yeah.
You cannot stand there with a clipboard and tell me the wind is 0 just because it's oscillating back and forth.
And that visceral gut-level rejection you're feeling is entirely correct. It is exactly why scientists and mathematicians had to invent a completely different way to measure the power of randomness.
Because the average is useless here.
Right. Since the average displacement is 0, we cannot measure the wind by looking at its direction. The direction cancels out. We have to measure its raw, unadulterated physical energy. We measure its variance.
Oh, I see. There's an amazing metaphor in the text to visualize this variance. Imagine a heavy industrial motor attached to a metal sieve. You are in a bakery, sifting flour. The motor turns on, and it starts violently shaking the sieve back and forth, left and right.
I love this one. If you ask a classical statistician, what is the average displacement of that sieve over the last 10 minutes? Their calculator will spit out the answer, 0.
Because at the end of the day, the sieve hasn't traveled across the bakery floor.
Exactly. It is still sitting right there, bolted to the table. The left movements and right movements canceled out perfectly.
But the sieve is experiencing massive amounts of violence. It's shattering the clumps of flour.
The motor's power isn't moving the sieve across the room, but it is dictating the maximum amplitude of the shake. It dictates how far the metal violently swings to the left before violently snapping back to the right. That volatility dial, the sigma in the equations, is the amplifier dial on that motor.
So if the dial's low, the sieve just hums and vibrates gently. The flour barely sifts.
Right. But if the dial is cranked to maximum, the sieve is swinging wildly, smashing into the safety guards, shaking the entire table. The average is still 0, but the energy is destructive.
This clicks perfectly with something from high school math that always felt like an arbitrary rule. When statisticians calculate variance, they always take the differences from the mean and they square them. They multiply the number by itself.
Yes, the squaring.
I always thought they just did that to get rid of negative signs so the numbers wouldn't cancel out to 0. It felt like a mathematical hack, just a trick to make the math work.
It is absolutely not a hack. It is a direct translation of literal physics. It is the square energy invariant.
Okay, break that down.
Why do we square things? Let's reach way back to high school physics. Do you remember the formula for the potential energy stored in a stretched spring?
Oh man, I'm digging deep here. It's 1/2 k times x squared, right?
Yes, 1/2 kx squared. Notice that the displacement, the x, is squared. What about the formula for the electrical power running through a wire, generating heat in a light bulb?
That's I squared r, right? Current squared times resistance.
I squared r. Notice the current is squared. In the physical universe, whenever a system is oscillating or vibrating, whether it is a physical spring stretching back and forth, or an alternating electrical current sloshing positive and negative 60 times a second, the physical energy generated is proportional to the square of the amplitude.
Oh, wow.
Squaring a number geometrically destroys the concept of direction. -3 squared is 9. +3 squared is 9. It strips away the left, the right, the positive, the negative, and leaves you with nothing but pure accumulating heat. Pure accumulating physical energy.
So variance isn't an abstract statistical parlor trick. Variance is the literal physical measurement of the shake energy in a system. You could measure in joules if you wanted to.
Exactly that. When an algorithmic trader or a statistician calculates variance, they're calculating the raw heat generated by the vibrating motor of the market.
That is so cool. But there's one more piece to that variance formula, though. The formula is the sum of x minus the average, mu squared. Why do we have to subtract the average before we square it? Why not just square the raw numbers of where the marble is?
To understand that, we need to look at a concept called baseline stripping.
Baseline stripping, okay.
Let's go back to the physical spring. Imagine a spring hanging from the ceiling in a total vacuum, zero gravity space station. It sits at its natural length. You call that resting length 0. You tap it, it bounces up and down, and you square those displacements to find the energy. The math works flawlessly.
Because there's no interference.
Right. But now bring that exact same spring down to Earth and hang a heavy 10-pound iron weight on it.
Gravity immediately pulls the spring down. Let's say it pulls it down exactly 20 centimeters.
Now the spring is completely motionless again. It's just hanging there, stretched by 20 centimeters. If I point to that motionless spring and ask you how much kinetic shake energy is currently in that system?
0. It's not moving. It's dead still.
But imagine if you didn't subtract the baseline in your math. If you just took its current position, 20 centimeters, and squared it, you would get 400. You would be telling the world that the system is vibrating wildly with 400 units of energy, when in reality, it is sitting dead still.
Ah, I see. Because the 20 centimeters isn't from the random wind. It's just the background gravity of the planet.
Precisely. The 20 centimeters is the new structural environmental baseline. It is the mu. If a gust of wind comes along and makes that heavyweight bounce between 18 and 22 centimeters, you cannot simply square 18 and 22.
You'd get massive, inaccurate numbers.
You have to subtract the heavy weight of gravity first. You subtract the 20, so 22 minus 20 is 2. You square the 2, and you get 4. That 4 represents the pure, unadulterated shake energy caused exclusively by the wind, completely stripped of the environmental background gravity.
That entirely reframes how we should look at variance in the real world. When someone analyzes the volatility of a tech startup's revenue, they have to strip out the baseline growth of the entire tech sector first. Otherwise, they are measuring the gravity of the economy, not the energy of the startup.
It's a massive cognitive trap, and because people misunderstand how variance and averages work, they make catastrophic life decisions. Because the average of random noise is 0, people mistakenly rely on averages to feel safe.
Right. You hear people say, well, the stock market averages an 8% return, so I'm safe over time. Or if the expected value of this bet is 0, at least I won't lose money. I'll just break even.
And that assumption is how people go bankrupt. When an expected value is 0, your survival is not determined by the average. Your survival is determined entirely by the standard deviation, by the amplitude of the variance.
Wait, really? How so?
Let's walk into a casino. You sit down to play a perfectly fair coin-flipping game against the house. 50-50 odds. Win $1, lose $1, your expected return, your average win is exactly 0 mathematically.
So if I sit there for 10 hours flipping the coin, I'll basically break even and go home.
In a theoretical world where you have infinite money, yes. But in the physical world, you do not have infinite money. What if, instead of betting $1, you bet your entire net worth, your life savings, on every single flip?
Oh, that's a terrible idea.
The expected average return is still mathematically 0. The math hasn't changed. But the volatility, the shake energy, is now massive. On the very first flip, you have a 50% chance of being completely wiped out. Game over.
Because the amplitude is so huge.
Exactly. The average cannot save you if the amplitude of the variance smashes your bankroll against the wall and shatters it before the average has time to play out. The net long-term effect is 0, but the short-term destructive power is fatal.
So whenever someone pitches me a system, an investment, a career path, a business model, and claims the average return is stable or 0, my immediate reaction shouldn't be comfort.
No, absolutely not.
My immediate reaction needs to be, wait, what is the boundary of the amplitude? How violently does this machine shake? Because the shake is what kills the operator long before the average arrives.
You're seeing the underlying mechanic perfectly. Never trust an average in a high-variance system. The variance is the energy, and the energy is what dictates your survival.
Okay, let's pull all of this together and take it to a darker place. We established that target minus reality, the rubber band, creates a stabilizing force. It physically creates a valley, a bowl, that our marble always rolls back down into. And the random wind is pure, violent energy trying to shake the marble out of the bowl.
Right.
But what happens if we intentionally do the thing we warned against earlier? What happens if we wire the thermostat backward? What if we flip the math?
You're talking about changing the core engine from target minus reality to reality minus target.
Yes. We said earlier it would cause a runaway explosion. I want to look at what that explosion actually looks like in the real world. Because this pivot takes us from the peace and stability of the Vasicek model directly into the ruthless, terrifying reality of wealth inequality.
The Matthew effect.
Ah, yes. To him who has, more will be given, and from him who has not, even what he has will be taken away. The Matthew effect.
All right, brutal.
In physics, biology, and engineering, we call this a positive feedback loop or an unstable equilibrium. When you flip that sign in the math, you completely invert the physical landscape of the universe you're modeling.
You literally flip the bowl upside down.
Yes. In the stable model, the marble was resting safely at the bottom of a valley. Any push away from the center was met with a rubber band pulling it back. When you change the math to reality minus target, you take that entire bowl, you flip it upside down, and you place the marble perfectly balanced at the extremely precarious tip-top of the mountain peak.
So the peak of the mountain represents the average baseline. Exactly. Imagine your personal wealth is that marble. If you have exactly the average amount of wealth in society, you are balanced perfectly at the peak. But what if you get a tiny breeze of luck in your favor? Your wealth becomes slightly more than the average. The reality is now greater than the target.
So reality minus target becomes a positive number.
And because it's a positive feedback loop, remember the screeching microphone? That positive number acts as a thruster. It actively pushes you further in the positive direction. You get richer, which makes the gap between you and the average even bigger.
Which makes the thruster even stronger.
Right. You accelerate down the side of the mountain, accumulating speed, resources, and wealth exponentially. You get access to better interest rates, exclusive investments, powerful networks. The system fuels itself.
But the exact opposite horror show happens if I start slightly below average.
If your wealth drops slightly below average, your reality is less than the target. The equation generates a negative number. But instead of pulling you back up like the rubber band, this system uses that negative number to actively push you further down.
It punishes you for being down.
The system extracts wealth from you. You get hit with overdraft fees, high-interest payday loans, late penalties. You accelerate into the abyss. It is a mathematical engine that ruthlessly rewards the winners and relentlessly crushes the losers.
This isn't just a philosophical idea. This dynamic is actually how wealth accumulation and stock prices are formally modeled in quantitative finance. They use a specific, famous equation for this called geometric Brownian motion.
Geometric Brownian motion is the heartbeat of capitalism and compound interest. The equation looks structurally different from our rubber band. It dictates how an asset's price, or your portfolio, changes. It balances the rate of change against two separate chunks, the deterministic growth part and the random win part.
But there is a crucial catch, right?
Yes. Both of those parts are multiplied by your current scale, by your current wealth.
Let's visualize that. Imagine your total wealth is a physical vehicle you are driving. The deterministic growth, the compound interest, your salary, your investments, is a rocket thruster bolted to the back of the vehicle. It pushes you forward.
And the random win, the market crashes, the unexpected hospital bills, the inflation is a violent storm you are trying to drive through.
And because your current scale, your wealth, multiplies both the thruster and the storm, the physical nature of your vehicle changes drastically depending on your bank account.
Completely changes. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, your scale is very small. You are essentially riding a bicycle. Your compound interest thruster is the size of a mosquito. It provides almost zero forward momentum.
But the storm is still hitting you.
Yes. A tiny random gust of wind, a flat tire, a broken water heater can blow your bicycle straight off a cliff into total ruin.
But if you are a multi-billionaire, it's a different story.
If you are a billionaire, your scale is massive. You are not on a bicycle. You are driving a colossal, heavy, depleted uranium battle tank. And your massive scale multiplies your thruster. You have a Saturn V rocket engine strapped to the back of your tank, generating astronomical, relentless forward momentum simply through baseline compound interest.
Wait. If the thruster and the storm both scale with wealth, then the ratio doesn't change. I remember looking at the formulas, and if you divide the thruster by the storm, the scale variable cancels itself out mathematically.
That's true.
The ratio of forward thrust to wind resistance is identical for the billionaire in the tank as it is for me on my bicycle. So why isn't the billionaire getting blown off a cliff by a billionaire-sized storm?
This is one of the most profound, counterintuitive paradoxes in finance, and you have just walked right into the time accumulation trap. Your brain is analyzing the ratio in a single frozen instant of time.
Oh, I see.
In any given millisecond, yes, the ratio of thrust to wind is mathematically identical for the billionaire and the cyclist, but we don't live our lives in a single millisecond. We live in the continuous flow of time, and here is the terrifying truth of the universe. Time treats certainty and randomness completely fundamentally differently.
We are entering what the research frames as the time-space distortion.
Yeah.
We have to talk about time. It is the most unfair, asymmetrical variable in all of stochastic calculus.
Let's look at how those two forces, the deterministic thruster and the random storm, accumulate as time flows endlessly forward.
The thruster is deterministic. It always points in one direction. Forward.
Because it is constant and directional, it accumulates linearly. If the thruster gives you 1 unit of forward push per month, after 100 months, you have accumulated exactly 100 units of forward push. The deterministic force grows directly proportional to time, which we represent simply as t.
But the random storm doesn't behave like that at all.
Not even close. We established that the storm is completely random. It blows you 3 feet forward, then 2 feet backward, then 1 foot left. It is constantly fighting itself, constantly canceling its own energy out in a chaotic mess.
Because it's random.
Because of this massive internal friction and self-cancellation, the cumulative net impact of the storm does not grow linearly. It grows proportionally to the square root of time, the square root of t.
This is such a mind-bending concept.
Yeah.
The certainty grows at t, but the noise grows at the square root of t.
Let's run a race to see how this plays out physically. A 100-month race for the billionaire's tank. In month 1, time t equals 1. The thruster has accumulated 1 unit of force. The storm has accumulated the square root of 1, which is also 1 unit of force.
So in the very first month, they are tied.
They are tied, the storm feels violent, the tank is getting rocked back and forth. The billionaire genuinely feels the volatility and might even panic.
But let's fast forward the simulation to month 100.
At month 100, t equals 100. The rocket thruster, accumulating linearly, is now 100 times stronger than it was on day 1. It is generating massive, unstoppable forward momentum. But what about the storm?
The storm accumulates at the square root of 100, which is only 10.
Exactly. The storm is only 10 times stronger? Look at the massive divergence that just occurred. The forward certainty has grown by a factor of 100, but the risk, the noise, the volatility has only grown by a factor of 10.
The ratio between them is no longer equal at all.
Not at all. The certainty has absolutely crushed the randomness.
So, as time stretches out toward infinity, the linear teat of compound growth totally obliterates the square root of random market noise. Time fundamentally dilutes randomness while simultaneously magnifying certainty.
That is the secret armor of the tank. The billionaire's wealth isn't immune to volatility on day 1, but because the sheer scale of their wealth allows them to simply survive the early storms, unlike the cyclist who gets wiped out on day 2, they get to stay in the game long enough to leverage the magic of t versus the square root of t.
They outlast the noise.
Over decades, the stock market's random daily crashes and spikes cancel each other out in that square root trap, while the underlying economic growth compounds linearly at t, driving the tank vertically up the mountain.
The research connects this ratio of thrust to storm to a metric that anyone who has ever looked at a mutual fund prospectus has heard of, the Sharpe ratio.
The Sharpe ratio is the holy grail of Wall Street. It is essentially your thruster divided by your storm. It measures efficiency. How much reward, how much forward thrust are you getting for every single unit of pain and volatility you are forced to endure?
And Wall Street uses this square root math every single day to sell their products. If a hedge fund manager calculates their Sharpe ratio based on daily trading data, they have a daily Sharpe ratio. But when they print up glossy brochures to pitch pension funds, they don't want to show a daily number.
No, that wouldn't look impressive enough.
Right. They want to show an annualized Sharpe ratio. How do they convert daily to annual? They don't just multiply the daily ratio by 252 trading days. They multiply it by the square root of 252.
Because the quants know the math. They know the returns will stack linearly over those 252 days, but the risk, the volatility, will only scale by the square root of 252 due to cancellation. The square root of 252 is roughly 15.8.
That's a huge difference.
So simply by holding a slightly profitable strategy for a whole year, the underlying physics of time automatically inflates their risk-adjusted performance metric by a factor of nearly 16.
That feels like a literal cheat code for reality.
Yeah.
Wait, if time dilutes risk, let's say I have a trading strategy with a tiny edge, just a 51% win rate. It's basically a coin flip, but the coin is slightly weighted in my favor. If I just play the game faster, if I artificially increase the number of iterations.
You have just reverse engineered the entire business model of high-frequency trading. This is the secret behind firms like Renaissance Technologies.
Wait, really? How does that actually work mechanically?
Think about a retail investor. They buy a stock, and they hold it for a year. Their UCT is 1. An HFT algorithm buys and sells stocks tens of thousands of times a single day. They build literal microwave towers between Chicago and New York to save literal milliseconds off their transmission times.
Why? Just to trade faster.
So they can artificially pump the variable t to astronomical numbers. Because they have a tiny deterministic edge, a tiny forward thruster, every microtrade adds a linear fraction to their profit. But because they trade so unbelievably fast, the random market noise is forced into the square root curve on a massive scale.
And the noise cancels itself out instantly.
By making millions of times larger every single day, they use time to compress the risk to virtually zero, turning a flimsy 51% edge into an absolute, guaranteed, physics-defying money-printing machine. High-frequency trading doesn't predict the market, it weaponizes time.
My mind is slightly blown, but I have a fundamental mechanical confusion about this square root concept. We keep talking about it being the accumulation of randomness.
Yeah.
And we established earlier that the average movement of a perfect random walk is exactly zero because the lefts and rights cancel out.
Right.
If the average movement is zero, how can the distance be the square root of t? If I am at zero, my distance is zero. Those two facts seem to fundamentally contradict each other.
It is the most common cognitive trap in all of statistics. You are conflating two very different physical concepts, displacement versus distance. The source we're studying clears this up beautifully with a thought experiment about a swarm of drunkards and a blind sniffer dog.
Let's visualize that swarm.
Imagine 10,000 highly intoxicated people leaving a bar at midnight. The front door of the bar is our origin point, point zero. They step out and start walking completely randomly. Step left, step right, forward, backward. It is total chaotic Brownian motion.
After an hour of this, you freeze time and look at where they all ended up.
If you take all 10,000 of their final coordinates, some are sitting 100 meters down the street to the east, some are passed out 100 meters to the west, and you mathematically average all their coordinates together, the positive easts and negative wests perfectly cancel out.
So they average out to zero.
The average displacement of the swarm, the center of mass, is exactly zero. As a collective entity, they haven't moved from the bar door.
But if I look at the street, they obviously aren't standing at the door. They are spread out everywhere.
That is where the blind sniffer dog comes in. A sniffer dog tracking a scent doesn't care about positive or negative coordinates on a Cartesian plane. It doesn't know east from west. It only tracks absolute physical distance. It measures how much shoe leather was burned away from the door.
So for the person who stumbled to positive 100 meters, the dog logs 100 meters. For the person who stumbled to negative 100 meters, the dog doesn't log negative 100. It logs absolute 100 meters.
Precisely. When you take the absolute value, the negative side of the bell curve folds over onto the positive side. Mathematically, it turns a standard Gaussian bell curve into a half-normal distribution.
Oh, that makes sense.
And when you average those absolute distances together, they no longer cancel out. They aggregate. And the average absolute distance that the swarm has spread away from the bar door is exactly proportional to the square root of time, the square root of t.
That perfectly explains the physical reality of diffusion. That's why if I drop a single drop of black ink into a glass of still water, the ink doesn't just stay in a tight little dot at the center.
The average displacement of all the billions of ink molecules is zero. The center point of the ink cloud never moves. But the absolute distance of the molecules from the center is growing at the square root of t. The cloud slowly, inexorably expands, getting wider and wider, proportional to the square root of the time that has passed since you dropped it in.
Okay, so the average distance a drunkard travels is the square root of t.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the maximum possible distance a single drunkard could theoretically travel?
The absolute theoretical maximum distance would occur if one incredibly, impossibly lucky drunkard stepped out of the bar and randomly chose to step east, and then randomly chose to step east again and again. For 100 consecutive steps, they never once took a step to the west. No friction, no self-cancellation.
In that miraculous case, their distance wouldn't be the square root of 100, which is 10. Their distance would be the full 100. They would be moving linearly with time at tape.
The math refers to this as the heaven's path, moving linearly at froth without any underlying deterministic thruster, purely by the grace of random luck. But let's run the probability on that. It's the equivalent of a coin landing on heads 100 times in a row.
That's basically impossible.
The probability is 1/2 to the power of 100. That is approximately 10 to the negative 31st power. It is a number so infinitesimally small, you could run the experiment with every atom in the universe since the Big Bang, and it likely wouldn't happen once.
And yet think about how many people live their lives banking on the heavens path. When people buy lottery tickets or when someone jumps randomly from career to career doing marketing for a year, then trying to learn coding, then trying to flip real estate, without building any underlying compounding skills, they are banking on the taught path.
They really are.
They're hoping to be that one drunkard who accidentally walks in a straight line to success. But they're ignoring the survivorship bias. The one guy who does flip 100 heads writes a book called How to Flip Heads, and everyone ignores the math.
It is the ultimate tragedy of relying on noise to navigate your life. They are chasing a literal mathematical impossibility. In a random system, if you do not purposefully install a core thruster, a mu life, your reality will always inescapably be the mortal path, the square root path.
That's bleak.
You will expend 100 units of your life's energy over 100 units of time, but because you are constantly changing directions, pivoting, and canceling out your own progress, you will only achieve 10 units of actual forward movement. The remaining 90 units of your life's energy are lost to the universe as pure friction and heat.
So how does an individual escape the curse of the mortal path?
You have to consciously install a mu. You have to build a deterministic thruster. It could be a daily directional habit reading 10 pages a day, practicing the guitar for 20 minutes every morning, automatically investing a fixed percentage of your paycheck.
Just something consistent.
It doesn't matter how small the mu is initially. As long as it is consistent and directional, it accumulates a T. And as we proved with the billionaire's tank, over a long enough timeline, the linear seat of a tiny daily habit will mathematically obliterate the square root of the world's random noise.
That is incredibly empowering. But I want to explore a dark side of this compounding we haven't touched yet. We've seen how noise gets diluted over time and how certainty wins the race. But there's a hidden, permanent damage that volatility inflicts on compounding systems.
Yes, there is.
When you look at the analytical solution for geometric Brownian motion, there is a terrifying reality buried in the exponent. If we have to talk about the volatility tax.
Ito's lemma. This is the concept where left brain linear arithmetic will actively lead you into financial ruin.
Let's set up a scenario that happens all the time. You have an investment portfolio. In year one, the market is hot and you gain 50%. In year two, a recession hits and you lose 50%. What is your average return? The left brain immediately jumps in. Plus 50, minus 50, my arithmetic average is 0. I broke even, I survive.
And the left brain is utterly mathematically wrong. Because wealth isn't additive, it is multiplicative. It compounds. Let's walk the listener through the actual dollars to see the destruction.
Okay, let's say you start with $100,000. Year one, you gain 50%. You make $50,000. You look at your account and you now have $150,000.
You feel like an absolute genius. You're planning your early retirement.
Then year two happens. You lose 50%. But you aren't losing 50% of your original 100K. You are losing 50% of your new larger total, the 150,000. Half of 150K is 75,000. So you end year two with exactly $75,000.
Look at the discrepancy. You started with 100K. You ended with 75K. Your average return was supposedly 0, but in reality, you lost 25% of your total wealth. A quarter of your net worth evaporated into thin air.
Let's do another 2 years just to twist the knife.
Yeah.
Year three, you bounce back, you gain 50% again. 50% 75K is 37.5K. You now have 112,500.
Okay, looking good again.
Year four, you lose 50% again. Half of 112.5K leaves you with $56,250. You've had 2 massive up years, 2 massive down years, and average is 0, and you've lost nearly half your money. How is that possible? Where did the money physically go?
It was consumed by what we call logarithmic drag. In mathematics, when you are compounding returns, you are no longer operating on a straight line. You are operating on a logarithmic curve. And logarithmic curves have a specific geometry. They are concave. They bend downward.
What does that mean for the money?
Because of that bend, a percentage gain brings you less absolute dollars than an equal percentage loss takes away. Losing 50% hurts your baseline drastically, more than gaining 50% helps it. Think about the effort to recover. If you lose 50% of your money, going from 100K to 50K, you don't need a 50% gain to get back to where you started. You need a 100% gain just to break even.
That asymmetry creates a permanent wear and tear on your wealth. It's like an engine running without oil. The friction slowly grinds it to dust. The research explains that a Japanese mathematician named Kiyoshi Ito proved exactly how much this wear and tear costs you. It is mathematically defined as exactly negative 1/2 sigma squared.
Yes, that negative 1/2 sigma squared is the volatility tax. When you solve the complex differential equation to find out what your actual wealth will be at a future time t, the formula has a very specific exponent. The first part of the exponent is your deterministic destiny. But it isn't just mun times t, it is mun minus 1/2 sigma squared all times t.
Let's translate that. Even if my rocket thruster, my mo, is incredibly powerful, the storm, the sigma, is secretly siphoning my rocket fuel.
Exactly. Your true guaranteed compound return rate is not mu. It is mu minus the volatility tax. Every single bump in the road, every violent swing in volatility, physically shaves off a layer of your long-term wealth. And notice that sigma is squared in the tax formula.
That means high volatility doesn't just hurt a little bit, it penalizes you exponentially.
Precisely. This perfectly explains a phenomenon you see in the stock market all the time. This is why boring, stable index funds or dividend portfolios funds with a modest mu but a very low sigma consistently crush highly volatile meme stocks over a 10 or 20-year period.
You see retail investors flocking to meme stocks because they have a high theoretical return, a massive move.
But their volatility, their sigma, is astronomical. When you take that massive sigma, square it, and divide by 2, the volatility tax becomes larger than the underlying return itself. The system mathematically destroys its own fuel.
That is wild.
Controlling your variance isn't just a psychological trick so you can sleep well at night and avoid panic selling. It is about plugging a literal mathematical leak in your compounding engine. If you do not control the sigma, you are paying a massive, invisible tax to the universe.
That is a harsh reality check. Okay, I want to pivot back to our rubber band model from the very beginning. We've talked extensively about the wind, the noise, and the thruster, but we need to talk about memory.
Oh, this is a beautiful concept.
We need to look at the terrifying, final analytical solution of the Vasicek model. When you look at the raw math on the page, it looks like an incomprehensible integral stretching endlessly. But the analysis we're referencing claims it is actually a physical story about memory and healing.
It is arguably the most elegant part of the entire framework. The integral in the solution contains this highly specific mathematical term. It raised to the power of gamma times the quantity s minus t.
Break that down into a mental movie for me, because my left brain is shutting down again.
Think of it as a decaying memory filter. Let's visualize a cup of freshly brewed, boiling hot tea sitting on a table in a cool room.
Okay, got it.
The variable s represents the past, the exact moment you poured the tea. The variable tit represents today, the present moment right now. Because s is in the past, s is numerically smaller than t, therefore the quantity s minus t is always a negative number.
And e raised to a negative power always represents an exponential decay curve.
Exactly. As time flows continuously from the past to the present, the numerical value of that expression shrinks closer and closer to 0. It perfectly models the hot water cooling down, inevitably approaching room temperature as time passes.
But how does a cooling cup of tea relate to the random windstorms hitting our marble?
The full mathematical term inside the integral is that decaying memory filter multiplied by dx, which represents the random wind. It means the system is taking a sum of all the historical windstorms that ever hit our marble. But, and this is the beautiful healing part, the further in the past a storm occurred, the more its impact has cooled down and decayed toward 0. The system is actively forgetting the trauma of the past.
Wait, I'm looking at the components of this and something seems out of place. Gamma is the stiffness of the rubber band, right? It represents our certainty, our tendency to return to the baseline. Why is gamma trapped inside the integral alongside dx, which represents pure randomness? Why are certainty and randomness mingled together inside the integration process?
That observation goes to the very heart of the physics. Gamma is inside that integral because the rubber band actively changes the historical winds. Imagine a massive windstorm hits the marble at time s. It knocks the marble way off course. But the very millisecond the wind stops blowing, what does the system do?
The rubber band starts pulling it back toward the center.
Yes. The rubber band instantly starts erasing the physical displacement caused by the wind. By the time we travel forward to today, the impact of that past storm isn't what it originally was. It has been continually, relentlessly reduced by the rubber band over all the intervening time.
So today's variance, the total displacement we see right now, is just the sum of all the historical wins that the rubber band hasn't finished erasing yet.
Exactly. The randomness and the certainty are engaged in a constant, ongoing tug of war across time, and the integral captures every frame of that battle.
The math is perfectly mimicking the physical reality. It's incredible. But the analysis goes even deeper into the syntax tricks. It points out a technique mathematicians use called integration by parts to solve this massive equation.
Right, the calculus technique.
They transform the random win, the dx, into a d's, which represents time. And when they execute that transformation, a gamma gets pulled entirely out to the front of the whole integral. Why do they do that? Is it just to make the math easier to read?
No, it is far deeper than that. This touches on a concept called dimensional analysis, or dimensional guardrails. It is how physicists ensure their equations don't accidentally break the fundamental laws of reality.
Right, like making sure you don't add seconds to meters or gallons to degrees Celsius.
Exactly. You have to balance the units. Originally, we were integrating with respect to the random win. We were summing up unitless random shocks. But when you use integration by parts to change the variable to time, you are now integrating with respect to time. You are essentially summing up the total area over time that the marble has spent away from the baseline.
But the output of the whole equation still needs to be a rate of change, a velocity, right?
That's the problem. You cannot equate a velocity to an area over time. The physical dimensions don't match. The equation would be illegal in the physical universe. So, to keep reality balanced, the math forces a gamma out to the front.
How does that help?
Gamma has the physical units of 1 over time, like a frequency or a rate. When you multiply gamma by the integral of time, the time dimensions perfectly cancel each other out. The physical units stay balanced as a velocity or rate. The math is literally forcing the physical dimensions of the universe to remain coherent. It refuses to let you break reality.
It's like the math has its own built-in immune system protecting the laws of physics. That is awe-inspiring. Okay, we have charted the path from the past to the present. We've seen how the rubber band erases history and heals the system. The final piece of the puzzle is turning our gaze from the present into the fog of the future.
The great unknown.
And this requires confronting what is arguably the most intimidating formula in the entire analysis, the transition probability density function.
It looks like pure hostile alphabet soup on the page. It's a lowercase p followed by parentheses containing y, t, a semicolon, and then y prime, t prime. If you try to parse that with your sequential left brain, you'll just get a headache.
So let's lean on the right brain again. The translation here is that this formula isn't math, it's a time-space portal.
That is exactly how you should visualize it. The first part of the formula, before the semicolon, is y and t. That represents here and now. It is solid reality. You are standing at position y at the current time t. You know this for an absolute fact. The second part, after the semicolon, is y prime and t prime. That is the future destination. That is the fog. It hasn't happened yet.
So the formula is calculating the probability of teleporting from the solid known reality of today into a very specific spot in the foggy unknown of tomorrow. I picture it like standing in the pitch dark at your current position. You are holding a powerful flashlight. You point the beam forward into the dark toward the future time. But the beam isn't a laser pointer. It spreads out.
It spreads out into a massive Gaussian bell curve, a probability wave. The brightest center of the beam is the most likely future path, but the edges of the beam illuminate a very wide range of possible alternative futures.
And the math uses another integral here to measure that beam. Why an integral?
Because you cannot predict a single exact point in the future. The mathematical probability of landing on one infinitely precise microscopic point, say, predicting the exact penny stock will close at 5 years from today, is 0. It's impossible.
So what do you do instead?
You draw a safe zone in the future, a
Wow.
range between point A and point B. The integral measures how much of your flashlight's beam, how much of that bell curve's probability mass actually lands inside that safe zone.
Applying this to human behavior,
Yeah.
people stress endlessly about the future. They obsess over whether they will be exactly at point E prime in 5 years. A teenager agonizes over getting into one specific college. A professional stresses over getting one exact job title by age 30. Does this formula mathematically prove that obsessing over a single point in the future is the wrong way to navigate life?
It absolutely proves it. The future is not a fixed dot you can aim a laser at. It is a conditional probability wave. It is constantly expanding outward from your current position. You have zero direct deterministic control over the future point. The fog is full of random winds, volatility taxes, and noise. But you have complete 100% control over the anchor point, the here and now.
Your current reality.
Yes. If you build a solid foundation today, if you improve your baseline skills, if you manage your risks to lower your volatility tax, if you establish that daily thruster we talked about, you are physically moving your anchor point to a more advantageous position. And because the future is just a wave expanding outward from the present, by optimizing today, your spotlight will naturally cast the vast majority of its probability mass into a successful, secure future zone.
You don't aim for a specific dot in the fog.
No, you build a strong lighthouse today and let the mathematical wave mechanics take care of illuminating the safe harbor tomorrow.
Wow. Let's take a breath and recap the incredible journey we just went on, because this has been a truly detailed exploration. We started with terrifying stochastic calculus equations that make people slam textbooks shut in panic. And we translated them into rubber bands, vibrating flower sieves, heavy tanks with rocket thrusters, staggering drunkards, and flashlights illuminating the future.
We stripped away the syntax and saw the physical engines operating beneath the symbols.
We learned that variance isn't just a statistical quirk to make numbers positive. It is literal, physical shake energy that can destroy a system if not managed. We learned the time accumulation trap.
That over long periods, the linear accumulation of deterministic daily habits will absolutely crush the square root accumulation of random market noise.
But we also learned the hidden danger of the volatility tax and how massive swings in variance act as a permanent drag, logarithmically siphoning the fuel right out of your compounding engine. And finally, we saw that the future isn't a fixed point to stress over, but a probability wave anchored entirely in the actions you take today.
It is a profoundly empowering, grounded way to view the complexities of the world.
And to the listener, you don't need a PhD in advanced mathematics to use these tools in your daily life. The next time you feel overwhelmed by random noise, whether it is volatility in your investment portfolio, chaos and unpredictability in your career path, or just the messy reality of life, stop and ask yourself a few questions based on these physical models. Are you relying on the square root curve of luck, hoping for the heaven's path, or are you building a linear daily habit?
Are you paying a massive invisible volatility tax because you aren't controlling your risks?
Exactly. Where is your anchor point today?
I think we should leave the listener with one final provocative thought to mull over. We talked about how the rubber band erases the impact of past random wins. It acts as a decaying memory filter that allows the system to heal and stabilize. Consider this mechanic in your own life. What is your personal rubber band? What is the internal psychological stiffness or resilience that guarantees that no matter what random violent shock hits you today, a failure, a rejection, a sudden personal crisis, it will be exponentially decayed and forgotten a year from now, allowing you to return to your baseline? If you don't cultivate a strong personal resilience, the winds of the past will dictate your trajectory forever.
That is an incredible thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep looking for the tangible physical realities hiding behind the complexities of the world, and we will catch you on the next one.